Hey guys, today I want to talk to you about some big mistakes that could get you cut off from your SNAP benefits. These are serious problems, and sometimes they happen without you even realizing it. So I need you to understand that even simple errors can seriously cost you. Every year, thousands of people lose their SNAP benefits, not necessarily because they did anything wrong or because they don't qualify anymore. Sometimes it's just the result of small, honest mistakes. Some of those mistakes could end up in overpayments, which is even worse because then you're required to pay it back, which usually means they're going to cut the amount of SNAP that you get going forward. And that can create a really serious hardship, as I'm sure you can imagine. Now, that being said, there are some very serious mistakes that are more intentional that can result in a permanent lifetime ban from the SNAP program. And that, of course, is catastrophic, right? A permanent lifetime ban means you are never going to get those benefits again. So we want to avoid those kinds of issues at all costs. And we'll be going over those a little bit later. Right? We know that the SNAP program is a federal program. It's offered by the federal government, but it's managed by the states. And that means that the USDA sets a lot of rules at the federal level, but then gives states waivers and flexibility to kind of do their own thing within a certain amount of parameters. And that means it can be hard to get really clear information about what you need to report, when you need to report it, how things are supposed to work. And it can really kind of muddy some of these issues. That's why it's so important to make sure that you understand the specific SNAP rules and guidelines for your specific state. So as we dive in here, I'm just curious, would you be interested in like state specific EBT guides? That's something I've thought about putting together, but it's not something we could really do here on the low income relief channel. We'd have to do that on our second channel, which is called Fast Facts by Low Income Relief. But if that's something that you guys are interested in seeing, I would be happy to start putting those together for you. Just let me know in the comments. Just drop like a quick yes if that's something that you would like me to do. Now, let's start with problem number one. All right. And this is going to be missing required paperwork. Now, if you've been on the program for any length of time, you probably know that you have to recertify your SNAP benefits every 6 to 12 months. And this is when you basically go through that whole reapplication process. There's usually paperwork requirements and evidence requirements and interviews and all sorts of hoops that you have to jump through, right? Now, if you're over age 60 or you're disabled or you do not receive any earned income from a job because of those things, then you may be eligible to extend that recertification period for up to 3 years through the Elderly Simplified Application Project. And that's called ESAP in a lot of areas. And that can make it so that you can go up to 3 years without having to jump through all those paperwork hoops. But here's the thing. Whenever it comes up, if you miss that paperwork, your case can close and you can lose your benefits. Right? You absolutely have to make sure that you're checking your mail, you're getting those letters, they have the right address to reach you, because missing that paperwork is far and away the most common reason why people end up losing their benefits. Because you miss a deadline, your case is closed, then you have to jump through all the hoops to reopen it, and it's just a headache. So make sure that you keep an eye out for that. The good news, of course, is that this isn't permanent. If you lose your benefits for this reason, it's as easy as going in to reapply because you just missed paperwork. So compared to the things we're going to talk about a little bit later, this one is a big headache, but it's relatively minor. The second big issue we're going to talk about is misrepresenting your household size. And that's easy to do in some cases because the way the USDA defines a household isn't necessarily how everyone else defines a household, right? It's not just everyone who lives with you. You actually have to live together and purchase and prepare your meals together. You have to do both things. And that can make it really complicated, right? Because maybe a roommate you live with, but you aren't purchasing and preparing food together, so they don't count. But then someone like a romantic partner or a child or so on would count because you are living together and purchasing food together. So there's all sorts of different ways that this plays out. The important thing is to know that leaving someone off your application can cause serious problems. And if you intentionally lie about your household size, that can be considered an intentional program violation and can carry serious consequences. We're going to talk more about those IPVs a little bit later. So just remember for now that changes in your household size, someone moving in or moving out, needs to be reported. Okay. Because then their income and their household size is going to need to be factored into how much SNAP you're receiving. If you aren't reporting those changes, you could end up with an overpayment where you're going to owe the office, or you could end up with an underpayment where you're simply not getting the amount of benefits that you should have been. So make sure you report those changes. Another thing you need to report is income and asset changes. And this gets stupid complicated. At this point, most people don't have to report every little change right away because the majority of states are using simplified reporting rules. Anyone who is not subject to simplified reporting is subject to change reporting. These are two different types of reporting requirements. Now, most people who have earned income, especially if they have kids in their household, they're going to be subject to simplified reporting. However, if you are an able-bodied adult without a dependent, if you're permanently disabled, over age 60, have $0 in reported income, or you're homeless or a seasonal worker, you're typically going to be subject to what is called change reporting. Now, we're going to break this down for you here over the next couple of slides, but it's really important that you understand which type of reporting applies to you so that you can follow those rules accurately. So, like I said, simplified reporting applies to most people. And if you're covered by that, then the only time you need to report changes before your next recertification is if your total income exceeds 130% of the federal poverty level for your household size, or if you're exceeding the program's income limits in any given month. Even if your income goes down again later, you have to report it if it happens in any given month by the 10th of the following month. So let's say in the month of July, something happened, you got a lot of overtime or whatever, you made a bunch of money, you were over the limits in July. You have to report that by August 10th, even if your recertification isn't until December. Now, if there's an able-bodied adult without dependents in your household, you have to report if they work less than 80 hours in a month. And I believe that is also required to be reported by the 10th of the following month. You also need to report if you receive a periodic review form. That's like a really short version of, updating your requirements. It's not a full recertification, it's just a quick check-in, but you still need to answer that if you receive one. Now, that's if you're covered by simplified reporting. If you are subject to change reporting, there are a lot more requirements. You're supposed to report changes in your income sources, any changes in your household income that are more than $100, whether that's an increase or a decrease, including income from private sources, which is like if you're given a gift by somebody or you get a grant or whatever. You also have to report changes in child support payments, household size changes, address changes, including your new rent and mortgage costs, heat and AC costs, utility costs, and so on. If you get a new or different vehicle, if your assets change, and again, if you have an able-bodied adult without dependents in your household who works less than 80 hours a month, you have to report that as well. So change reporting has a lot of different requirements to it. Now, the good news here, despite how complicated all of that just was, is that CLASP says it is not an intentional program violation should you give the wrong information because you did not understand what you were required to report or if you made a mistake. If you made too much in SNAP benefits because you made a mistake, you may be required to pay back the extra benefits you received, but you should not be subject to additional penalties. So at least there is that. Hopefully that's a little bit of a relief to you because a little bit later we are going to talk about those things that can result in temporary or permanent bans from SNAP. And I wanted you to know for sure that accidentally not understanding which income reporting you fall under isn't going to count as one of those things that's going to give you one of those hard bans. Another thing that can mess you up is failing to comply with child support. Now, this only applies in some states. Some states do require both custodial and non-custodial parents to cooperate with child support in order to get their SNAP benefits. Currently, only 9 states are requiring that, according to Propel, and those are Alaska, Florida, Idaho, Kansas, Kentucky, Michigan, Mississippi, Nebraska, and South Dakota. Now, I have seen posts all over social media from people who are afraid to go get SNAP benefits because they don't want to have to deal with the child support requirements. Either they don't know who the father is, they don't know where the father is, they are no contact with the father didn't, support the birth of the child or, doesn't want to be involved or whatever reason, they're afraid to go get SNAP because of it. The good news is that even if you live in one of those states where child support cooperation is required, there are plenty of good cause exceptions available to you. For example, if there is a domestic violence situation and going after child support is going to put you or your child in danger, they are not going to require you to cooperate with child support in that case. And there are other good cause exceptions available as well. So please, if this applies to you, ask your state office what you need to do and if those exceptions are available. Able-bodied adults without dependents are expected to participate in community engagement for at least 80 hours a week. This can include work, volunteering, college, all sorts of different things to make that requirement. Under the new rules that are rolling out, those changes are expected to apply to everyone under the age of 65 who doesn't have a dependent child and meets all sorts of different requirements. You can check out our other videos for how those changes are being implemented and where and when and so on and so forth. We have a lot of videos about that. So definitely go check those out. Another thing to watch for when it comes to the SNAP program is they will close your account if you are not using your card enough. So if you don't use your EBT card for a long time, your account will go inactive. They will automatically shut it down. You will lose any accrued benefits that you have on that card at that time. So right now, that's usually like 274 days, which is about 9 months. The biggest group at risk for this is seniors or people who receive near the minimum. Because if you're only getting about $23, $25 a month in benefits, some people will choose to save those up and then go to Costco or whatever and make a bulk purchase to get the most out of those benefits. Now, that's fine, but if you're saving them up for too long, then eventually you run the risk of having that account shut down. So just make sure to make periodic purchases, even if they're small, to keep that account active if you are choosing to maybe save up for a bigger item later on. I know most people can't afford to save their EBT benefits, so I know that doesn't apply to everyone. Now let's talk about these intentional program violations, because this is a big deal. Intentional program violations happen when you intentionally lie or withhold the whole truth from the agency, or you break rules of the program. So an IPV might include putting false information on your application, selling your SNAP benefits for cash, or trading them for ineligible items. That is a big deal. Purchasing non-eligible items like clothing or electronics, using someone else's EBT card, applying for benefits in multiple states simultaneously. These are all big deals. And guys, I have to warn you, I love that you're here and I love that you're watching my videos, and I will always do my best to be honest and accurate with you. But there are other influencers out there who encourage people to break these rules, and it puts your benefits at risk. There are groups on Facebook that I have seen that intentionally track down glitches, which usually involve being able to buy something on Amazon or on Walmart or on DoorDash that you shouldn't be allowed to buy. For example, for a while, there was a $200 coffee maker that you could buy with EBT, and Amazon had mistakenly marked that as EBT eligible. And people were going out and buying it because these influencers were sharing this. And a lot of people got in trouble for that, or are at risk of still getting in trouble for that in the future, because that is an intentional program violation when you buy something that you know should not be covered. Now, I have seen, I'm not going to name the influencer at issue here, but I have seen at least one of those influencers go on the record as saying that, well, if they've authorized you to buy it, then it can't be wrong. And that is simply not true, right? It says in the rules right here that if you are purchasing items that you know should not be eligible with your EBT, it is an intentional program violation. And at the end of the day, it's going to be the everyday people making those purchases who pay the price for that, not the person on TikTok or Facebook or Instagram or wherever who was showcasing that it was a glitch, right? So please be smart with your benefits and don't fall into those traps. Because the thing is with intentional program violations, those penalties are huge. For the first one, you can get a 12-month suspension, which means you don't get SNAP for 12 months. On the second offense, it's a 24-month suspension, which means 2 years without being able to get food benefits. And on your third offense, it is a lifetime suspension, a permanent ban from the SNAP program, and you never get to get those benefits again. That is huge. And of course, that doesn't even count for any legal action that they could file if it's, clearly fraud, or any repayment that you may have to make. Those are this is huge, huge consequences here. And some IPVs carry even more severe consequences. So if you're caught buying, selling, or trading SNAP valued at $500 or more, you get a permanent lifetime disqualification on the first offense. There are no second chances for that. If you make a false statement so that you get benefits in more than one state at a time, you can be disqualified for up to 10 years. These are huge consequences. Now, if you ever are accused of an IPV, you're going to get a letter. The letter is going to include a form with this big long title. You can read it here on screen, but ultimately it's a waiver. Do not sign that waiver before you speak to a lawyer if you ever receive a letter like this. CLASP is an organization that helps advocate for people, and they're saying that if you sign that form, it means you admit to the IPV and you give up your right to a hearing. And many states pressure clients into unknowingly signing away their rights to a hearing. So if you are ever accused of an IPV, do not sign that form. Contact legal aid immediately. Reach out to an expert, get the help that you need to be able to navigate that situation safely.